When North Americans draw up a mental schema of a dense city, they often believe that this city will have accessible features for the disabled, whether they're blind, in a wheelchair, some form of disability. As somebody who is low vision, legally blind, who speaks Mandarin, I figured I would take a look at China, a country that is famous for its high-density cities and development over the last several decades. How have they been doing with accessibility in their urban areas? The data you're now seeing compares Harbin in the northeast of China with Anchorage, Alaska, two cities which I feel are broadly emblematic of what is the average mode of development in their respective regions. That is, Anchorage, Alaska, with its high-rise developments in a small pocket of the city surrounded by suburban developments meant to be used by commuters, and Harbin, with its high-rise towers dotting up, complete with urban freeways running to and fro. The natural assumption one might have is a city such as Harbin, that is highly populated and dense, has more accommodating of an environment for the disabled. Let's take a look at some accommodations that can be used in an urban setting to aid blind and visually impaired people in navigation. Please note that the examples from China are not necessarily from Harbin. The first is Braille being placed on public buildings and in elevators to help a blind or visually impaired person read where they're going. Secondly, are more physical navigational aids. These are things like tactile pathways, or with larger intersections, you may see an audible crosswalk system that reads out the amount of time you have left to cross a street, not just listing the numbers in a countdown. You may rightly believe, as I did, that there was some kind of global standard for how aids for visually impaired and blind people are to be installed. Things like the tactile pathways should always go near curbs, right? That way somebody with low vision like myself can just run our canes across the bumps and feel where the curb is, and so that we don't fall into a train track or walk into traffic. Well, in fact, that's not really the case. Every country does things a bit differently, and every local government may not enforce the same regulation as evenly. Case in point, there are several instances I've found of blind pathways in China being very uniquely placed. This first example shows that rather than being horizontal to the drop-off point of this, I assume, staircase or sidewalk, instead, the tactile pathway is placed perpendicular, running alongside. And so how this plays out in reality is a visually impaired or blind person is walking along this pathway and suddenly there's a drop-off. While that is bad, at least in that photo, it seemed like one cohesive unit. This second example shows us that the tactile pathways were placed interspersed with these black blocks that, yes, give off a great aesthetic, but are not really designed to help somebody like me navigate. At least in this photo, there's no curb that is being brought to the attention of the blind and visually impaired person, so why not just have it be one consistent block of yellow if it's meant as a navigational tool? Now that we've discussed a bit about the navigational aids, let's move on to Braille. The implementation of Braille can be a video into itself, and so for this section I'd like to keep it a bit high level and give just an overview of the situation. The State Council of China at one point estimated that only 10% of the country's 17 million people with visual disabilities could actually read Braille. The numbers are not much different in the United States. According to the outlet Sixth Tone, back in 2017, a woman in Liaoning province had to sue the central government's Ministry of Education over getting access to Braille test prep material. More relevant to the specific urban planning angle, the World of Chinese published an article that discussed the implementation of Braille on bus stops in Beijing, the nation's capital. According to the article, which I will read part of for you now, though China has national regulations regarding Braille signage and audio broadcasts in public areas like bus stops, implementation has been a mixed bag. According to the Beijing TV and radio station, the city's Xicheng district added Braille to 16 bus stop signs in 2015, serving around 6,000 visually impaired residents of the district. However, 2 years later, journalists found that many of these signs were poorly implemented, with tactile arrows indicating the direction of the bus were off. The fact that this is the situation in Beijing, the nation's capital, the place that should have all the resources necessary to make an accessible and accommodating environment for the blind and visually impaired, speaks volumes of how the situation could be elsewhere in the country. I hope this video has done a small part in telling a larger story and that you've learned something new today. Accessibility and urban planning is something you can really sink your teeth into, especially for somebody like myself, where this impacts my daily life. I can speak for hours on it, and I hope to speak about this more in the future. If you have suggestions or think there's something I missed in this discussion, please let me know in the comments down below. I would like to leave you all with something positive, which is an article from RADII China, written by Lu Zhou, entitled, "Here's How the Visually Impaired in China Watch Movies." It discusses in broad strokes the concept of audio cinema, this idea that you can bring the audio descriptions of a movie into a kind of live theater-style performance. This is a phenomena around China. One of the volunteers, surnamed Shi, is quoted as saying, "Although we cannot restore their lost vision, it is still meaningful to let the visually impaired enjoy a movie in a more smooth, comprehensive, and clear way. After all, you can listen to stories without watching the video." A link to the full article can be found in the description box down below. I highly encourage you to go read it if this topic sounds like something that would interest you. I myself am quite interested to know if audio description theater is something that is popular in other places, or if it's a unique phenomena to China and other places with tonal languages. I would love to know if other such things exist around the world. Thank you all for tuning into this episode of Uniquely Unseen. I will see you in the next one. Have a great day.